Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to review how to solve two-step equations. As you can see, these are the notes that you have seen in class before. The goal is still to isolate the variable, which means getting the variable by itself. The variable which can be done by performing the inverse or opposite operations. Okay, so now that there's two steps happening, you need to use the order of operations in reverse in order to solve, because solving equations is always working backwards. Since we work backwards to solve for the variable, we will use SADMEP, which is the order of operations in reverse. Subtraction and addition from left to right, multiplication and division from left to right. Then when you guys get into the upper grades, it's going to be exponents and finally parentheses. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to look for is the addition and subtraction, which, if you remember correctly, that is asking you to find your constant. So this is your constant that we're looking for here. And the constant is 10. So the inverse of adding 10 would be to subtract 10 from both sides of the equation. And I always draw a line through the equal sign so I know what two sides of the equation there are. So 2 minus 10 is negative 8. And 10 minus 10 is 0. So I'm left with 4x equals negative 8. The inverse of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1, so I'm left with x equals negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. X equals negative 2. All right, so if I wanted to check my work, all I would do is plug in a negative 2 for x and make sure that that equals 2. So 4 times negative 2 is negative 8, plus 10 is positive 2, and positive 2 equals positive 2. So I know that x equals negative 2 is the correct answer. Let's try another one. Draw your line through the equal sign. Okay, find your constant, which is the addition and subtraction. Your constant in this situation is going to be 5. So subtracting 5, the inverse of subtracting 5 is adding 5. So I add 5 to both sides of the equation. 10 plus 5 is 15. And then obviously negative 5 or minus 5 plus 5 makes 0. So I'm left with negative 3y on the left side. The inverse of multiplying by a negative 3 is dividing by a negative 3. So when I do that, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1y. So y is equal to 15 divided by negative 3, which is negative 5. You can always check your work by plugging in the answer that you have found into your equation. So negative 3 times negative 5 minus 5 equals 10. So a negative times a negative is positive, so I've got positive 15 minus 5 equals 10. That makes sense. 10 equals 10. All right, cool. Let's keep moving on. So, trying it again. Don't forget SADMEP. So we got to find our constant. Okay. Now notice how the equation or the variable is on the right-hand side of the equation now. It's really not that big of a deal though. You still pull your line through the equal sign. You still look for your constant. Your constant is 1 in this situation. Even though it's not coming at the end, it's still your constant. So I'm going to get rid of 1 by a negative 1 on both sides. Negative 7 and negative 1 makes negative 8. All right. And then I've got 1 minus 1 is 0. And I've got 2/3 n. Now let's take a quick run down memory lane when it comes to multiplying by fractions. The inverse of multiplying by a fraction would be to divide by that fraction. Well, if I'm dividing fractions, the rules that we have learned how to use are to multiply by the reciprocal, and some of you guys call that KFC, but if I multiply by the reciprocal, 2/3 becomes 3/2. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, so 3/2 again. And then, of course, when I'm multiplying 3/2 and 2/3, they simplify to 1n. And then I have to multiply a whole number by a fraction. So to do that, I need to put it over 1. So 8 times 3, or negative 8 times 3, is negative 24. 2 times 1 is 2. Negative 24 divided by 2 is negative 12 equals n. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Trying it again, if I wanted to check my work, negative 7 equals 1 plus 2/3 times negative 12. Make it a fraction over 1. 2 times negative 12 is negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 gives me negative 7. So I know I did it right. Don't forget to use your integer rules, your fraction rules, your decimal rules, anything that you remember about operating with those numbers. All right, one more time. Line through the equal sign. Find your constant. The constant here is a positive 2. So the inverse of adding 2 is subtracting 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0, so I'm left with x divided by 6. The opposite of dividing by 6 is multiplying by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so I'm left with x equals 2 times 6 is 12. Let's check our work, make sure that we've got this done correctly. 12 divided by 6 plus 2 equals 4. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Nice work, ladies and gentlemen. Use this to help you with your homework tonight. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.